button, turns your mic on. So you won't be able to hear, like you won't hear yourself or Steve out of that speaker, but you'll be able to hear everybody else.
Okay.
So, and frankly, I thought we've never done
So
that.
then I'll want to turn that off whenever I'm speaking.
No, it'll automatically noise cancel.
Oh.
Lights, camera, action, I guess. This is Ryan Cross. I'll call the meeting to order, and if you will, whenever you speak today, make sure and use your mic so that way it does pick up on the recording. First, we have the minutes from the last meeting, if we can get those reviewed and then have an approval in a second. I'll take a motion for approval. There it is. Seems to be locked up. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, vote with your buttons.
It's not letting me do anything, but I will verbally approve.
I can see it was moved by Crystal, but I don't see a second either, actually. Seems to have locked us out. Okay. Who wants the second?
I'll second by voice.
Okay. Do I have a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So the minutes are approved. The first item for consideration today is item A.
GeoBond program. Our first item that we have up for request, which some of you have seen often, is about twice a year we come forward with this as work is identified and funding is needed. This is our streets repair program. It's a base repair program, and what it does is we come in, and as you can see, we've got about 75 base repairs on the current contract. It costs us about $13,000 on average to do each one of them, and that's just us coming down through the concrete or asphalt down into the substructure, compacting that and bringing it back up so we don't have a base failure, and it adds longevity to each of the roadways that we do that to. So our request today is for $500,000 in unlisted funding for the 2017. Any questions?
How big are those repairs typically in size?
I mean, it can be as small as like a 2x2 to as large as a whole panel replacement, which could be like a 12x12.
And at what point does it go from doing a small repair like that to just an entire replacement?
I mean, we just look at the cost, right?
Okay.
So if it's comparison-wise, if a roadway has about 40% or so base failure, it's definitely cost-effective to just go back and redo the entire street. So.
Okay. Any other questions? We'll go ahead and ask for a motion for approval. It was moved by Jacqueline, seconded by Ben. All in favor? Looks like the buttons are working. Okay, so that passes. Item B.
So this is a request for the purchase of some traffic data collection equipment. What this request would provide is 80 more of the rubber tubes that you see across the road sometimes when you drive. That collects our ADT. And also 2 active radar collection devices and the software to run those. And what that helps us do is that's part of our prioritization method for any bond projects or any additional funding requests. for streets, we utilize counters, ADT, so average daily traffic, amount of vehicles per day across there to help into that equation. So we are needing, as you can see, we've got only 29 working ones now, and we do about 1,200 to 1,500 counts per year. So it's a pretty big city, so. Any questions?
What is the useful life of that type of equipment?
That one there that's a radar. I don't know, just pick
But
up.
for like the tubes that are on the roads that you see all the time, how long do those typically last?
Depends on, if they were like a highway use, it depends on the semis and how often we go across those. I'd hesitate to say that we get any more than 10 years out of them, but.
Okay, well, that's longer than I would
So-
think, so.
Are any of the new ones, is it the same of what is being used, or is any of them like a more modern, like upgraded that might?
Every time we purchase them, we purchase the latest and greatest, so.
If there's no further questions, I'll take a motion. So we have a first by David and a second by Linda. Item B passes. Item C.
Our last request for today is our quiet zone project that we have at Wilshire and Classen Boulevard area there. As you can see on the graphic, we overlaid the plans the best that we could with this new technology that we have. And you can see that what it is, the idea is to have a quiet zone where the train that's coming or approaching through that intersection doesn't have to blow its horn. And so the medians there and the new arms that come down and the new signals help accomplish that. So there's no train horn. And so that's what we're doing here. And so we're wanting to move forward. It was an 07 listed project, and so we're moving forward with that, but we just need some 17 funds to finish it up. So.
Any questions on this item?
I actually do. So I actually cross this area pretty much every day to work. So I was just interested in, I guess, what changes would be made compared to what it is right now.
So, and it's a hard graphic to see, but as you can see, well, I believe that's east to west, no, north to south. So if you look at, as you get closer to the actual railroad, which is diagonally through there, there's a hard island that we create. It's a curb with an island in there, and so that'll be in there, and that'll be one of the major changes. So you can't go around the gates, which is the biggest liability that the railroad has, right? Is people passing through there. So when that's up, that allows it not to have their horns blown. So.
I have a question. Have you, as we've done
thought you were over here.
more of these quiet zones across the city, have you seen any negative impacts at all
No, we have not.
in terms of safety?
No, and we work with ODOT on these as well as the railroad company, the different railroad individuals. So this is what their preferred method for it. So.
Okay, if there's no further questions, I'll take a motion. Motion by Crystal, seconded by Lindsay. All in favor, use your buttons. That passes. Now we're on to the informational items. Item A is the Go Bond Executive Summary.
They actually gonna put that up there, or, there we go. As a point of just reference, what we report on expenditures, we don't include encumbrances, otherwise known as purchase orders. So the IRS requires us to report on actual expenditures. And so if you notice that for the month of July, we only had $329,000 worth of expenditures, but we've got a lot of open POs, and I'll, if you will go down to the next page. If you notice that our sale year 2021, we're at 63% of the 85% required for the IRS, and we need $25 million to meet that requirement. We have $20 million in POs and encumbrances, or encumbrances. And so, and we have, for 2022, we have 32 million, and for 2023, we have 43 million in encumbrances. So as those things get paid, that percentage goes up, and the 12-month average goes up. So, and typically July and August are the lowest expenditure months, and you'll start seeing that creeping up and up as the year goes on. As these guys get all the work done, as they get the invoices paid, and that typically changes throughout the year. Next page, please. As I said before, for the 2021, we're at 63% of the 85% requirement. We're at 38% for 2022 sale year. 2023, we're just getting started at 5%. That compares to the comparable years. This year, -1, -2, -3, or 64, 16, and 4%. We have $138 million remaining balance in money we can spend.
Any questions on this item? I'll say, do we need a motion on this, or are we able to just move? Okay, that's what I was thinking. It's like, so on to the bond program workshop.
So I'm Amy Douglas. I'm with the City Attorney's Office, and I've already promised Ryan that I would make this short and sweet. We're not going to stay here very long, but we have a lot of new members, and we have a lot of members that have been here for a while who just wanted a little refresher about what your role is, and to kind of explain why the bond program as a whole is so important. And so I want to explain it in terms of what's relevant to you all, and then when I'm done, feel free to ask questions. I did provide some written materials that you have that if you want to review them later. One was just sort of in a nutshell what I'm going to talk about today. I also provided a copy of the overall bond procedures that the City Council has approved that sort of defines and sets forth your role and what you're doing and why you're so important to us. But let's start out. Let's go to the next slide, Tammy. Is it working? So basically the whole reason to have bonds in the first place is under the Oklahoma Constitution, cities in Oklahoma cannot become indebted. We have to get the voters to approve for us to go into debt. And so the city manager does not have a credit card that he gets to use when we need a new police station or anything like that built. Our revenues from the city are limited. We only get sales tax revenue to fund our organizations, our buildings. We don't get to dip into, we don't get income tax. We don't get a lot of the property tax that is collected. We do get a very limited amount for certain things, including to pay off bonds. So how cities go into debt is through general obligation bonds. We take those to the voters to get approved. The last time we did that was in December of 2017. Next slide, please. So most of all of our general obligation bonds have been issued pursuant to Section 27 of Article 10 of the Oklahoma Constitution. And that just says you have to have a majority of voters in order to approve this debt. So we go and we get a very large authorization, a very large not to exceed amount, but we can't go and just sell that all at once. That would cause property taxes to go like from here to here, and we'd never get another bond issue passed. Plus, there's not the capacity. If we put $500 million worth of street work out tomorrow, we don't have the contractors that could even do that. So every March, we do a bond sale. We get those proceeds in May, and that will fund the priority list that Public Works works on with finance, with you all, with the citizens, with the city council to produce, and a lot of consultants. You know, some of the traffic data information that we were approving in one of our items, probably some of that goes to say, hey, this is a road that we need to bump up on our list because it has problems. And now we know that there's a lot more traffic on it now than there was 5-10 years ago. The next slide, please. So citizens, when you go to vote, and we usually do a bond vote, it's usually in December, and the citizens vote by proposition, and a proposition is basically just a category. Some of those are streets, police, fire, drainage, traffic control. We have certain ones for economic development, civic center, just a wide variety of things, of needs that we know, and we're looking into the future and saying we're going to need some money to fund these huge projects that just the sales tax we earn every year is not going to be able to fund. And also an important thing on that is that we can't combine, let's go ahead and go, and I can show the next. That's what a ballot looks like that you would vote on to approve a bond issue. And so you're gonna get to vote per section. We can't go and combine, everybody loves the streets projects, and normally those are always gonna get approved because that has the most impact on everybody's daily lives. So we can't take that and combine it with maybe some other proposition, some other area that we don't think is as popular. Maybe there's been a lot of bad press about the police that year. Well, we couldn't go and have a combined streets police proposition. That's illegal, and they call it log rolling. So you vote by proposition. So you could vote yes on one or no on another. Normally we get very high approval ratings on everything. So that's an example of the ballot, what it would look like. Let's go to the next slide. That'll show, that's exactly what came from the 2017 ballot with regard to the street proposition. So you can see that the voters authorized us to have an amount of close to $500 million to use in the future on streets projects. We don't go to the voters very often. Like I said, this was 2017, so that was 6 years ago. Before that, it was 2007. Before that, it was 2000. Okay, so when we sell bonds under Section 27 of the Constitution, there are only certain things that we can fund with those bonds. One is streets, one is bridges, and one is public utilities. And over the years, the case law has defined what a public utility is. And it's stuff like airports, libraries, police stations, fire stations. So we're limited in what we can use those bond funds for. And the public utilities, we can't go and build a museum and then turn it over to a private party, or it be a private museum that we put bond money into. It has to be owned exclusively by the city. And also, there's another provision in the Constitution that says if you vote, well, you have to vote to borrow money, and you have to identify the purpose for which you're borrowing the money, and you can't divert that to another purpose. So if you approve $5 million for streets, and we have some extra street money at one time, but we really need a new police station, we can't go and switch that. We have to always use that street money within that proposition. So mostly I've talked about constitutional provisions. There's a really important statutory provision. It's called the Bond Issue Proceeds Act, and that's really where this body comes into play. And the purpose of that act, I think, is really important, and it's to guarantee to the citizens of the state, and actually it's the Oklahoma City for these purposes, that the proceeds of the bond issues you approved are being spent only for those purposes for which you approved them, that we can't go and do something else. So on the next slide, you'll see, and what the act requires is that 70% of the proceeds have to be specifically listed out. We have to show you exactly what project it is. Some of them, that's from the streets proposition. Some of them aren't quite as specific, but we have to be as specific as we possibly know. Sometimes we just know, well, we need a new library and it's going to be in this rough area. Sometimes we don't have an exact location because maybe we haven't purchased the land yet. And we also have to provide, our engineers provide an estimate of what that's going to cost. And so that's going to compose at least 70% of those street bonds that we have authorization for. The other 30% is the part where you all are so important, and that's what we refer to internally as our unlisted money. So one other thing to mention, when you go to vote, you're not voting on that specific list of streets. That is all of that information, that 70% of the listed projects, it's probably 20 to 30 pages. So you're just going to be voting on the proposition, like streets, police, but all of that detailed information in those listed projects have to be publicized, so they'll be in the Journal Record, they'll be on our website way in advance of whenever you go to an election. Let's see. And like I said before, so the 30% doesn't have to be listed. So that 30% is the unlisted money that we come to you and say, hey, we need some help with some stuff. So your main role, like I said, is to take that 30%. And a lot of the projects that you're gonna see and you're gonna approve, and the memos that you see are where we need money to fund something totally new that we had no expectation that we were going to need money for, and that's why it's not in that 70%. So let's say, like, just, I don't know that this has ever happened, but we have a tornado that comes through and it tears part of a bridge up, and we need emergency money to repair that bridge. We might come to you and say, hey, we need $3 million to fix this bridge. It wasn't a listed project. Will you guys approve that as an unlisted project, and will you recommend to council that we spend that money from that unlisted? And it would have to come from the bridges proposition in that particular case. Also, and maybe even more importantly, is we need that unlisted money to help with the listed projects. It's become really important for this last authorization because in 2017, nobody had any idea that we were going to go through a global pandemic, that construction prices were going to skyrocket. So a lot of times we have a project that has been approved by the voters. It was a listed, one of those 70% projects. We need to finish it. Back in 2017, it was $3 million to do, and now it's $5 million. So we come to you and we say, hey, we need to use some of that unlisted money. Can you help us out and approve this? Rarely we have projects that are listed that maybe it's a $2 million project. I mean, I don't know, Chad can tell me, do we ever have anything come in under budget anymore? We used to, and we would call those money surplus funds, and then those would also come to you to be able to recommend allocating those to either new unlisted projects or listed projects we need help on. But we're seeing less and less of that right now just because of what has happened in the global economy lately. The City Council has adopted some bond policies. Chad provided them to you a couple of weeks ago. I also provided them to you, but they specifically list out, in a nutshell, what I just kind of explained to you, what your role is and how valuable you are in helping us administer this entire huge program. I think that's about it. Does anybody have any questions on anything And if you're like me and you need time to digest it and read through it, feel free. You guys can always email me or call me. All of our numbers are like our name at okc.gov. So mine is amy.douglas@okc.gov, 1S on Douglas. Feel free if you read through it and come up with questions later. Yeah. Chad, can you think of anything that I should add or that's important that I left out? Okay. Then that concludes my presentation. Thank you, guys.
That was great. Are we sharing that information with new people every time they come on to the Bond Advisory Committee?
Yeah, well, I should say I got the information for this. Yeah, I got the information for this. I don't know if that's necessarily because this is what was going to be included in the meeting, but I did get that information ahead of time.
Because I just think it would be great to share every time that we
Yes.
get a new member.
So I had met with someone on the committee who was new, just privately. She had come up to me afterwards, Lindsay also, but this other person, I'd met with her individually in my office and explained it. There was a misunderstanding on my part. I thought that all of you were getting all the materials, like as a, hey, here you go, introduction, and I just kind of expected people to ask me questions. When I realized, and I feel so bad that I dropped the ball on that, when I realized that, I said immediately, okay, I need to offer some background so you all have a good framework to understand the value of what you're providing. And we will be doing that in the future. I won't be coming to you all as a body. I'll try to address that individually as people come on board instead of wasting everybody's time. But if any time you feel like you want a refresher, you've forgotten something, and feel free to ask. My door's open. I'm always happy to do this again. And maybe it's a good idea that we just schedule this and do it on, maybe not every year, but every couple of years, just depending on what kind of turnover we have on the board.
No, I completely agree, and I think that's a great idea. So thank you.
Yeah.
I was going to say with that, I was going to say up until probably page 9, I feel like that really did encompass everything that you needed to know. So again, because I got it ahead of time, I was able to read that. So I don't feel like anything you said I didn't already, or I wasn't already able to read. So.
Okay, is there any new business? Any items from committee members? Any citizens to be heard? Maybe Christopher? No. Just kidding. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Moved by Lindsay, seconded by Linda. Thank you, everybody.